In fact, I've been telling a lot of people the creative is number 7 out of 10 in the list of things that I'm focused on right now. Because going through a Disney and a Starbucks and a few of the other places, I've become very overtly a systems thinker, a strategic systems thinker.
Hey everyone, I'm Susan Betts. I'm a global brand strategist. I've worked for consulting and tech companies most of my career, both in Brazil and in the US, and I now spend my time across both countries. I'm doing some very cool stuff like talking to some of the world's most amazing creatives and marketers like Jayanta Jenkins here. Our talk today is made possible by Jayanta himself. Thank you so much for accepting this unusual and unorthodox invitation. And I also want to thank my friends over at Marcas, a Brazil-based leading brand and creative agency whose founders I've worked with and know for many, many years now and truly admire. So thank you again, Jayanta. Thanks to Marcas, and thank you everyone who's watching and listening today. You are in for a real treat. So without much ado, Jayanta, I want to start off by asking you to tell us, who is Jayanta by Jayanta in maybe a couple minutes.
So hello, everyone. And thank you, Susan, very much for inviting me to be a part of this conversation today. And, hello to your audience. And I have spent the last 20 plus years in marketing and advertising as a creative executive. And I formally started my career out in the agency world as an art director, and then evolved beyond that into working for brands. And I would say the thing that has most excited me about my career up to this point has been, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I can see it more clearly now as I look over my shoulder a little bit, is that I've always worked at the intersection of culture, technology, emerging technology, and just celebrating our stories across the globe. And I've been very fortunate to work with individuals, organizations, and on brands that have provided the canvas, so to speak, to really share and tell very compelling narratives that are connected to brands that, make people see themselves hopefully better in most instances. Mm-hmm. And I love music. I am a massive Prince fan. Those who know me are not surprised I just mentioned that. Those who don't know me, welcome. And, I would say personally, the thing that I'm most proud of currently and eternally is being a dad. I have a young son that he's now 7. It's really been beautiful tracking his progress and being a part of his life and having him really shape the way that I look at the world as well. And, it's been a real blessing being in this industry, getting to know you. You and I intersected a number of years ago where I'm currently located here in Seattle. So yeah, I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, I'm excited too, and very, very grateful, Jayant. And you've always been someone who I've seen as being extremely deliberate about where you put your energy, your professional energy, your personal energy, right at that intersection. And my question is, what is your philosophy for choosing which brands you work for at that intersection? Is there anything in common that ties these brands together? And maybe you could give us a little overview of what brands you actually have worked for.
Yeah, I would say, if I take your question in order, and I most recently had a conversation with someone who was talking to me about the work that I've done, and they acknowledged that through my body of work, there is such a intentional celebration of humanity. And as I look at my work, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm probably so close to it that it hasn't really occurred to me. And if you go to my website, the 3 statements that meet you at my website are innovate, inspire, have fun. And I think, there's 2 of those words in there, that inspire and have fun, are very much at the center of like my human condition. And I would also say that I just have remained so curious about humanity, which is why I love to travel, which is why I love hearing your stories about how you're traveling the world. And the things that I get to learn by observing other cultures, and how it just helps me feel more connected and creates a stronger sense of belonging. So let's say humanity is at the sort of as a pillar, belonging is another pillar. And then how are we moving the culture forward, And I think moving the culture forward, to do that, you have to really appreciate where you have been or where the culture has been. And inviting people from other parts of the discussion in to learn. They may not agree, but if you can walk away going, I actually understand this better, that is amazing. And I would say the brands that I've gotten to work on have been a part of that discussion. So it'd be brands like Nike, from a sports perspective. I would say Gatorade has been another one. Apple, working on Beats by Dre has been one. And those are very sports-centric brands. And, competition makes us better, I think. And celebrating human achievement is inspiring, by my assertion, and providing the tools, the products to continue to help us, break records or set the bar for humanity, I think is pretty cool. And then when I had an opportunity to work for Twitter, that really came out of 2 things. One, I didn't want to get typecast as a sports person. Not that I dislike sports. I love sports culture. But Twitter, when you talk about opening up the faucet on all things culture globally and conversation, it was the most profound experience that I've had to that point in my career. And getting to work very closely with some of the leaders, the founders of that company, actually, Jack Dorsey and Biz Stone. And I was literally just talking about Twitter a few hours ago with a friend of mine that I brought into the organization to work with me. And I just said, we have not gotten that close to doing something that raw for a brand, where what you said in a room actually ended up in the world. And it wasn't even so much about the work specifically, as much as it was about taking all of the executive creative superpowers that I had built up to that point. And you may say, what are those superpowers? Collaboration, systems thinking, building a team and supporting them in a way that they can be very strategically attuned, and then, leveling that up into an organization and distributed it in a way that everyone goes, look at this work we did and the impact it's having in the world in terms of understanding who we are as a service. It hadn't, I'd done a lot of great things and worked with amazing people, but Twitter was like kind of next level in terms of my growth. And then, another brand that I had the good fortune of working with, and I'm going out of order, is Disney. Talk about storytelling and IP, and just a company that has spanned entertainment for 100 years, and how they're still innovating and still part of the conversation. And from there, Starbucks. And another really amazing company with, the customer experience first around a very global, universal ritual, drinking coffee.
It's really, really, really impressive, Jayanta. I mean, you've worked for so many different categories, from electronics to coffee, as you say, but more than coffee, it's really sort of the immersive experience of Starbucks. And and retail to entertainment and, with Disney and conversations with Twitter. You've worked for brands that didn't follow culture. You've worked for brands that were culture, that set culture, that embodied culture. And it's not a coincidence that all of these brands are mega brands in Brazil as well. Like all of them, without exception, all Brazilians know them. They know Samsung, use Samsung, Apple, you name it, Nat Geo, Disney. They are truly, truly global brands with humanity at the center, as you say.
Like, I'm fascinated by blockchain technology. I'm fascinated by all of the legislation that is finally starting to create some clarity around things like stablecoins. In fact, I've been telling a lot of people the creative is number 7 out of 10 in the list of things that I'm focused on right now. Because going through a Disney and a Starbucks and a few of the other places, I've become very overtly a systems thinker, a strategic systems thinker. And what that looks like is building systems and empowering teams to do work that is strategically aligned to help drive results, which of course impacts the creative and creates impactful creative. I think a lot of people who have grown up the way I have at a Wieden Kennedy working at Nike, or a Shy at Day working on Gatorade, it's like you fall on the sword for just doing the best creative ads ever, and then you get to a level that I have, and you've won the Grand Prix, you've won all the awards, and the air is very thin in the award show mountaintop. You know what I mean? So it's not as important to me. But what is important is helping people like me all around the world. And when I say like me, those who just come into this industry kind of like very raw, and just start giving some tools to be able to get to an opportunity where you're actually really building something from the ground up. And so Jack Dorsey had said something to me when I was at Twitter, and he was comparing the way that Twitter was born to the way Square, or it's now called Block, was created. And he said to me, the most important thing to him was to create an organization where the person at the top, you could take that person out and that organization would still thrive. And what I interpreted that as, if you build a strong architecture, right, and build it the right way, the next person that comes in can just continue to build up.
It's especially hard at such a large institution as you're saying, and being a systems thinker. Certainly,
you nailed it. And it's like, at some point, you like in your career, you're like, I just want to do something easy. And I'm like, for some reason, I just keep going straight back into the fire. You know what I mean? Or I'll say it differently. I keep going straight back into opportunities that actually provide enough friction for me to continue to grow. And I don't know, Susan, I've never taken the easy path.
Yeah. One of your 3 words was fun, right? And
yeah, have fun.
Like no pain, no gain, no pain, no fun. Jay, let me pivot a little bit and ask about all of those awards and Lions and everything. And I guess the question is less about the awards, but more about what has made you proud, more for the learning of our viewers. Is there any example or case study from your career, pick any, that has truly exceeded your expectations, like really surprised you and wowed you and those around you, especially your leaders, but mostly your consumers or customers? And as that systems thinker, I think it would be helpful for our viewers to sort of understand from you what made that kind of success possible.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and I like that you brought in the consumer piece, because I would love to start there. I can sort of draw like a dotted line from a few projects over the last 20 years. And I was literally looking at something that I did at Wieden Kennedy for LeBron James called the LeBrons. And it's been heralded or considered, let's use that word more than heralded, one of his best commercials, and it has stood out in the top 10 of like basketball commercials, you know, and by some people's standards of all time. And this is by an audience generated by, you know, this is consumer-led thinking. This isn't like Cannes Lions or One Show or D&AD. And you can often tell how much traction something gets when it gets replicated, right? And, you know, I was watching that spot this yesterday, and it has aged so well. It has evolved, and sort of like it just still has its same resonance. I think I love that I've been a part of work that people still talk about and still reference as something they remember in a moment in time. And, you know, I did some stuff for Procter & Gamble. I started a nonprofit that is still in existence called Saturday Morning. And we did a piece called The Look that was very much about unconscious bias and the way that the team and I approached that work and the consumer response to it. And I mean, like very powerful storytelling, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
can you tell us a little bit more about The Look specifically,
yeah,
for the audience, because it's very, very powerful.
And The Look follows a father and son kind of on a journey throughout the day. It opens with the father waking up in the morning, looking at camera, and then he's with his son who he walks to school, and you can see that as the young boy is saying hello to a young girl who's not African American, he just, you know, what kids do. My 7-year-old does it all the time. He loves to play. Hi. And then the mom sort of rolls up the window. And the little girl's like, what? And then the next scene is the father going into a, you know, high-end store, like a men's luxury goods store. And the security guards are looking at him. But what's happening with the camera is it's objective, subjective. So you're seeing it from this point of view, and then the camera becomes a point of view of me looking out and looking and seeing this sort of back and forth. Ultimately, what you're beginning to understand is the unconscious bias that this young man is experiencing throughout his day-to-day, which, you know, it's hard to articulate that in a way that doesn't like make someone feel like they're being called out or you're playing the victim. Ultimately, the story ends with you going into a courtroom and you're assuming, okay, here we go, black guy. He's been, you know, like stared at, looked at, and then you go into the camera and you discover that he's the judge. And, you know, the sign-off says, let's talk about the look so we can, like, let's discuss the look so we can, I forget the end of line of that. But, you know, it's a very powerful piece that I think, you know, again, when I talk about celebrating our similarities and sharing our stories in a way that provides empathy, you know, I think that The Look is a very, very powerful example of amazing storytelling, no words, music, very powerful storytelling that when you walk away from it, it invites a conversation, right? And I would say that when you ask me about the work that I've done through and through, like what makes me most proud is I would say more than 75% of the work that I've done has generated that, let's talk about this, you know, in a healthy way. I would say the most powerful expression of that would be the work that I did at Twitter, the hashtag. It was just so starkly, amazingly, graphically, conceptually, like, it was like, probably, I don't know, I say the first time, but it was amongst a few projects that I've done where what you saw in the room ended up in the world, you know, which is like, that rarely happens.
Right.
You know?
It gets cut and diluted as it goes all the way to the top, right?
Yeah. So, you know, the art of shepherding that type of work through an organization is why being a systems thinker and being strategic and really helping design, you know, a workflow that is designed for creating that fluidity of work to go through the system. And I'm so proud of the work that I've done, and a lot of that work did win a lot of awards. And I think the awards are important because it really signifies a moment in time. It also creates benchmarks. But ultimately, what I am really most proud of, Susan, is creating the frameworks and the blueprints for others to figure out how to do it in their own way, and really demystifying what this creative thing means. And I can't tell you how many conversations I have with C-suite executives and below that celebrate the fact that someone that walks into a room with dreadlocks and all the things is like coming from a very business-centric point of view. And I often say, and this is sort of probably the third line in my bio on my site, is I use creativity in service of business results.
I just wanted to say that it strikes me that there's another thread across all of your work, as you said, beyond or in addition to the storytelling, the humanity, which is actually courageous. That's that's the boldness and the courageousness of your work, the Twitter work, the LeBron work, the look for P&G. It's all courageous because it's not just setting culture, it's setting culture by provoking conversations. And I think people can live life sort of neutralized by what's going on around the world, or they can stop and think for a minute and be provoked by these brands that are willing to step into those zones. And I think in addition to the you mentioned culture and brand and tech, I would actually say social issues as well. That's another circle in your Venn diagram, which is there's no way to start these conversations if you're not courageous enough to actually associate your brands and put your brand in the center of social issues where it is relevant and credible for you to do so.
Look, I'm from a somewhat rural part, or at one point it was rural, Virginia. My grandfather never got any formal education. He was, functionally illiterate. Most of my mother's side of the family got the bare minimum in terms of education. The flip side of that was my father's family, who's from Atlanta, had the PhDs and were doctorates and were doing things, in the 40s and 50s that a lot of African Americans broadly weren't doing. And I think of like living in between this intersection of like very rural existence and this like highly educated aspect of my family, being close to the DC area, having a father that grew up during the Jim Crow era, having a grandfather that, effectively was marginalized, and then having a great-grandfather that was an indentured servant, and then just having an appreciation for my background or my heritage and all people's heritage. It's that curiosity that provokes me to present conversations in a way that doesn't challenge people, but allows them to explore things beyond what they know. And I think that's really important. And you said something that's really important. You're not just doing these social issues because you're trying to get a rise out of people. If it's appropriate and contextual to the conversation and right for the brand to enter into that conversation, let's do it. It was all day for Twitter. And for Jack Dorsey, his statement was, we are meant to be a platform that shows sides and doesn't take sides. That's kind of like incredible, right? And being an African American in the South and walking into places where I know fundamentally, like, what are you doing here, boy? And I'm like, that's a good question. Let's talk about that. I will tell you why I'm here, or no harm intended, no harm received, And so, it doesn't work everywhere. And there are places that any of us can go and not feel comfortable. But at the end of the day, I want to explore these things in a way that just at least reduces the hatred or the like, like otherness of it all.
I love it. I think, the more these conversations can happen, the closer you are to a topic, to a situation, to an issue, that kind of proximity drives understanding. Without that kind of proximity, you don't have understanding, and that understanding leads to empathy, and that empathy leads to belonging ultimately, which is one of your words. So there you go. You've just sort of connected. You mentioned driving business results, and I was going to get there too, because there are many brand leaders and business leaders watching us today who struggle to prove the value of brand, the value of creative, the value of those investments to themselves, to their leadership chains, thinking about brand as a business driving asset. How would you say your work has impacted the vastly different categories you've been in?
I'm always selling something. We always are. Like, that's what it is. And I don't make any amends or bends or like chagrins about like what my job is. I'm a commercial artist at the end of the day, and I think some brands have more permission to storytell in much more human, visceral ways, like a Nike, right? They've earned that right because they've entered into some of these difficult conversations and earned the trust of consumers, right? But they are still selling stuff, even that commercial for the LeBrons was selling LeBron as a very multifaceted athlete who's selling shoes. That's a shoe commercial. I did a thing for Serena for Beats, which celebrated her achievements as an athlete, but it started with music. She puts on the headphones, turns on this thing, and then, you're off and running, literally.
It was also very much a brand ad. So,
but I mean, look, you got to think about who my mentors, who my heroes, mentors, and like bosses were. Lee Clow, Think Different. Dan Wyden, Just Do It. Jack Dorsey, like put Twitter into the world. Mike Hughes from the Martin Agency, Virginia's for Lovers. The best kind of product storytelling is when it builds brand as well, right? Yeah, but
two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm.
Every Apple advert is a product advert.
Right.
Period. You're not going to convince me otherwise. Not going to convince me. And you think about what Apple has done with their product storytelling. It's emotional. It's relevant. And I think, like, to me, that's a little bit of like the cheat sheet or the cliff notes or the sort of like secret sort of substance. And like, I don't ever talk about brand or product. What am I selling? And I'll find a compelling way to like tell the story.
It's a false dichotomy, right? And the other false dichotomy, well, I mean, in my opinion, maybe you agree or disagree, is the dichotomy between brand and performance, brand building and performance marketing.
I love that though. I love it. Like, I love it. And here's why, because think about it, and you've worked at Microsoft, you understand, like, performance marketing is incredible in this day and age because of all the tools associated with how we get to show up across so many different surfaces, right? And I think performance marketing through the lens of storytelling and strategy becomes even more impressive. And I think performance marketing becomes even more interesting when you're dealing with a large company like just use Starbucks. A lot of the loyalty and things that drove profits for Starbucks quarter after quarter were done through the app. So there was this whole CRM, customer journey narrative that was facilitating all these product launches to get people into the store. And then when you got to the store, you had this human component, which are the baristas and the environment and the third place. I'm not deeply analytical, and I'm not the person that can go in and do the data science of it all. But I absolutely am not one of those people that hears the word performance marketing or CRM and thinks, oh Lord, here we go again. I think it's all these tools that we have to sell stuff. Commercial.
It's part of what we do, and it's part of the game. I would love to talk about LLMs and tech and I mean, in keeping up with the spirit of our times, we would not be a proper brand podcast or videocast or program if we didn't touch on AI, right? So tell us about AI. How do you think the role and practice of branding and creative is changing in organizations because of it?
I literally had a conversation this afternoon with someone who owns a small boutique agency, and I may have the text right here. All right, I'm going to read this to your audience, and I'm going to read it to you. So my friend says, "Good morning, Jayanta. You've been on my mind. How are you? Would love to catch up next week if you're around. Separately, we're pulling together a quick summary, notable bullets of the top 12 to 15 state of AI and marketing ideas. It's a think tank that I've dropped into the last couple of weeks. Would love to chat with you about it." And I'm like, I spoke with her. I called her immediately, literally. I called her immediately. And I'm like, "So let's talk about this." And she's like, "Yeah, we're really struggling to figure out how these tools that are coming into play are really, where's craft begin and end when you're using, some of these mid-journey tools." And I'm sitting here and I'm like, you know what? You're starting this conversation for me in the wrong place. Because honestly, like, I don't care about mid-journey. I don't care about any of these video sort of tools. I think they're important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dismissing them, but I'm not starting from that perspective because those are utilities. What I'm most interested in is LLMs in the context of using data to create very extensive pattern recognized thought experiments around, for example, if you could take all of the briefs and all of the failures and wins of a company like Nike, put it into a box, and then be able to utilize that information to interact with it, to think about like next, I think that's interesting. And I like where I want to continue to sort of lean into LLMs is using very concise data to actually begin to create matrixed sort of models of things that you can begin to ask questions and spar and really develop some different ways of thinking that have nothing to do with mid-journey, making images. I think this, again, that stuff is very important, but I am super interested in seeing how in 6 months to a year to 3 to 5, where this LLM generative intelligence goes, because we are somewhere we've never been before. And if you're talking about tools, you're already gone. You're way back there somewhere if you're only talking about the tool.
Okay, we're almost at the end, and I wanna zoom into Brazil. I know you've worked on global brands and thought about Brazil a lot. Especially at Nike, it's a huge brand in Brazil, and Starbucks as coffee drinking culture in Brazil, and many of the other brands that you've mentioned. And so I just wanted to tap into your beautiful creative brain and ask, what are your perceptions of the Brazilian market, and mostly what are some interesting things that the brands that you've worked on have done in Brazil?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Brazil, actually, via Nike, via Gatorade, and Twitter as well. And what I will say personally about Brazil is what a beautiful country, and the influences, the sheer cultural melting pot that is Brazil. I love it, from Sao Paulo to Rio, and there is a richness and an energy and a rhythm that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, And I think that has created a true epicenter for creative work that has come out of Brazil over the last few decades, and probably far even before. But you think about when you live there, you're from there, like Brazil is it's so rich culturally. And I think the creative that has come out of Brazil is a reflection of all of the influences, the languages, the foods, the smells. I can't wait to travel there with my son. The music, and the work that I've done for Brazil has really been through the lens of football.
It's interesting that you mentioned both music and football and rhythm, because there's a word that I guess only exists in Brazil, and I think it very much describes our culture, which is the word ginga. I don't know if you ever came across that, but
Of course.
it sort of comes. It's applied to football, and it's applied to music. Ginga is sort of that rhythm, dancing to the ginga, but it's also the way Brazilian players were known for, sort of dancing with the ball, dancing around it. And you apply the ginga to creativity as well.
Yeah, you apply it to everything. I mean, is it like, again, there's a rhythm in that part of the world that is unmistakable, and yes, you see it in football and some of the teams of the past, and it'll come back. I think it's that ginga that will continue to push the culture forward in times of unrest, in times of, really challenge or opportunity, politically and otherwise. And, I just, like I said, when I visited Brazil, I see myself when I come to Brazil, if I'm honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of the music, the food, the culture, the ginga. Like I see myself in your culture.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. You're always welcome here, Jay. Come. Let's go watch some football and eat some amazing food and listen to some incredible music together. But we're almost wrapping up here. I probably only have a couple questions, and they're probably quick ones as well.
Sure.
Please mention an up and coming brand that we should keep our eyes on.
Aura, the Aura ring.
Mm.
I think that is a brand that I am paying close attention to, and I have been I was an early adopter. I think there's a lot of things happening in the health tech industry that are worthy of paying attention to. And I think Aura is a disruptor. I hope Apple doesn't come in and basically steal their thunder in the way they've done with a lot of other brands. But I really think from a tech perspective, I've been really, really close to Aura, and I appreciate a lot of the marketing that they're doing as well. But I think, I'm at a point in my life where even more so, because I've always had a very holistic, preventive sort of health aspect of my whole existence about taking care of myself. But I'm really fascinated with Aura right now. Super fascinated.
Mm.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an Apple acquisition at some point.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Google.
Watch this space.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, last but not least, Jayanta, give us your quick branding tips.
I'm going to take it back from the top and bring it to the bottom. Innovate, inspire, have fun.
Amazing. What a way to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone who's been watching today.